Hello, my name is Brian Mayer. I'm an attorney practicing law in Southern California. And today I'm going to talk to you about what to do when CPS comes to your door. Now, Child Protective Services, CPS, is called by many different names depending on what county you're in. And while I practice only in Southern California, the principles really apply to anywhere in the United States. And it's called by many names, but we're going to call it CPS because that's how it's best known. Child Protective Services, CPS. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the biggest mistake that people make. I'm going to tell you what to do instead of making that mistake. I'm going to tell you why you should do that, and then I'm going to tell you what happens if you don't take the correct steps. And if you're watching this, then you probably already know what CPS does. CPS is the governmental entity that is responsible for protecting children from abuse or neglect. They will, when they receive an allegation of some sort of abuse or neglect, they are required under law to investigate it. And about 80% of the time, they are not able to get the evidence they need to prosecute a case, but about 20% of the time that they will. And sometimes that can result in criminal charges. Oftentimes it can just wreak havoc on a family, and it can even result in a parent's child being permanently removed from them and being adopted out to another family. So the stakes are really very, very high. A lot of people will see Child Protective Services as the heroes who are standing up for the children who can't protect themselves. And oftentimes that's how people who work for CPS perceive themselves. Some people will perceive them as villains who tear families apart and lie and do all these terrible things. But the fact is that you can disagree with me on this, but from my perspective, CPS, they're not the good guys. They're also not the bad guys. What they are is they are the government. And as the government, they're like any other governmental entity. They're like the United States Postal Service. They're like the Internal Revenue Service. They're not like the military that spends $700 for a toilet cover seat. They're just a government, and they were created by people in a vacuum who have never had any contact with the system, who probably will never have any contact with them. And it's a system that's designed to operate in a certain way on paper, but functionally, they have a tremendous amount of shortcomings. So, and that's definitely the danger. But unfortunately, we're the ones who have to deal with those imperfections. And well, what kind of imperfections are we talking about? Well, we're talking it's a government agency and it's run by people. People are subject to their biases. They're subject to their prejudices, their filters, their preconceptions. They're also subject to just making simple factual mistakes, and they are subject, if the circumstances are right, they're subject to lying. And those mistakes, those prejudices, those filters, those lies, they can absolutely destroy individuals. And CPS is in a position, they're in a position to do that, unfortunately. It's something we hope doesn't happen, but anyone who's worked in this arena knows that this does happen. I saw something very interesting some time ago, which was it was a training seminar. It was designed for people who were at various stages of working with CPS and working in an investigatory setting. And the question was asked, how many of you believe that you have ever falsely accused or to use the proper legal language, petitioned allegations of abuse or neglect against a parent. How many of you believe you have ever personally done that? And not a single person in the room raised their hand. So any intelligent person knows that just as a matter of there simply has to be a mistake. There's no way that none of these people have ever done this ever. It's just not possible. And there's that lack of awareness, though, and that's part of the humanity. Is these people simply don't, when they're making a mistake, they don't know it, because the skill set required to identify the mistake is also the same skill set that would prevent the mistake from happening in the first place. So by definition, this is going to happen. They're not going to have any awareness of it, so they are always going to think that they're the good guys. But they're not. They're the government, and that's part of their imperfection. So, fortunately, because they are the government, though, that we have certain rights, and these rights exist for the purpose of protecting the innocent, and for those who are in fact guilty, it's for protecting them against an unfair outcome, either overly burdensome or overreactive, or however you want to look at it. But it's to protect the innocent, and even if someone's guilty, protect them from being treated unfairly, even in the context of that guilt. So we do have those protections in place, and it's important that we have that proportional response. So what I want to do before talking about what the right is and how to respond, I'm going to give you an example. So let's imagine this. Let's imagine that you have two boys. Okay, you have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and you also have a crazy mother-in-law who is always complaining that you are abusing the kids, and you're too rough with them, and you hit them, and you're leaving bruises, and your 4-year-old just recently hit his head on the table, and she thinks that you hit him on purpose, and so you have this person out here saying, hey, this is going on. And so a CPS, one evening you're at home with your boys, and a CPS social worker comes to the door. And as soon as they identify themselves, you think to yourself, oh, this is my mother-in-law, that's what's going on. And the CPS social worker introduces, we'll make it a female, introduces herself, and she says, hey, just let you know, I am investigating some allegations involving your kids. I know you probably didn't do anything wrong, but we have to investigate all of these, and this is probably just going to take a few minutes, but I'd like to come in and just talk to you and talk to your kids and just clear up what's going on here, and then I'll be on my way. Would it be okay if I just came in for a little bit? So the biggest mistake that people tend to make is they tend to think to themselves, sure, I haven't done anything wrong, I can explain this away. That is the wrong answer. That is absolutely the wrong answer. That's the single biggest mistake that people make, and it's that belief that has resulted in some really, really terrible outcomes. With due respect to anyone who's watching this, to anyone who watches this and ignores my admonishment, and then experiences this and has someone come to their door and they still think to themselves, hey, I can explain this away, it makes sense, I'll let them in, it's not a big deal, you have signed your own death warrant as far as I'm concerned, because you've been warned. It's absolutely the biggest mistake, because when you're dealing with these situations, what the truth is really doesn't matter. What matters is what the evidence shows. For CPS to take any sort of action at all involving you or your children, they have to collect evidence. And if you do nothing, if you do not talk to them, if you don't cooperate with them, then they usually have no evidence, and they cannot move forward in your case. So by simply inviting them in, you are opening up a Pandora's box, because now you are giving them evidence. There's nothing that you can give them that's going to make your situation better. And the biggest problem is that you, more often than not, will just end up making things worse. And I'll give you some examples for that. So now you've said to the social worker, hey, come on in. Sure, we'll take a few minutes. I have nothing to hide. Come on in. I have nothing to hide. And so the social worker comes in. And the social worker comes in and they immediately make a few observations. Number one, you have an outlet on the wall that does not have child protective covers on it. From dinner, you have a knife on the table, sitting on the kitchen table. Your 2-year-old just soiled himself and he needs a diaper change. And also in one of the adjacent rooms, there's a pile of dirty laundry. Without you having even said a single word, without you answering a single question, you have now given that social worker ammunition that they can put into a report, and if they deem necessary, use as leverage against you and evidence of your abuse or neglect with your kids. The social worker writes down, home is severely inadequate, safety inadequate, sharp knives within immediate reach of children, unprotected electrical outlets, signs of lack of basic hygiene, including a pile of laundry, child, 2-year-old was heavily soiled and smelled terrible at time of arrival. All of these things can be used to paint a portrait of you, an unfavorable portrait of you later on, if they decide that, hey, there's something here. And you have to keep in mind with all these things as well, as I described this, it's at all times you're subject to the investigating social worker's perceptions. You may say, okay, how can, they can't, everything is going to have to go through their lens. All the information that's being provided is going through their lens. So how things really are doesn't really matter so much as it does how this person who you've never met, who thinks you might be a child abuser, how this person is perceiving and portraying you. And you don't know what their agenda is. On what planet do you live where someone working for the government can be trusted with that kind of power simply because they passed a civil service exam and were given a badge? So it's just not, you're just absolutely, even without speaking, just by letting them into the home, you're creating this risk and giving them this potential for evidence that is just totally unnecessary. Why even give them the opportunity to make an incorrect observation if not giving them the observation is an option? And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But okay, so you've let the social worker into the home. Social worker says, okay, no outlet covers, open knife, dirty diapers, dirty clothes. Great start. You're off to a great start. And now the social worker starts to ask you questions. And so the social worker says, okay, so tell me, how do you discipline your children? And you say, oh, well, it's okay to spank. Generally speaking, it's okay to spank your child if you don't leave a mark, and at least 49 of the 50 states that's currently the case. And you say, yeah, I spank them occasionally. That's it. And the social worker asks, okay, well, have they ever been hurt in your care? And you say, oh, well, about a week ago, we were playing tag on the couch, and I went to tag my 2-year-old, and I hit him, and he fell off the couch, but he was okay. It left a mark, just a little bit of a mark, but wasn't that big of a deal. So here's what just happened in that conversation. Number one, you admitted to striking your child on a regular basis. Number two, you admitted to hitting your child so hard last week that it knocked them off the couch and it left a physical injury on them. So, the social worker, you're giving this information, and this information can be construed or warped however it needs to be in order to accomplish whatever they feel is right for your situation. And that's based on how they perceive your situation. So you're already just simple things. You're just giving them this terrible ammunition. So now you see the social worker starting to write down these notes on her pad, and she's writing with increasing intensity, and you start to say to yourself, well, I'm talking about, spanking my kids and knocking them off, and it seems fine to me. It's coming out of my mouth, and I know I haven't done anything wrong. But still, maybe I'll just ask, and you say, so is it, I see you're taking these notes. Is it okay if I record this conversation? And the social worker says, no, we don't allow that. So now the social worker interprets you as becoming hostile and defensive, and they write down in their notes, parent admits that they regularly strike their children, and last week struck the child so hard that it knocked them off the couch, and the 2-year-old suffered a visible injury as a result. Upon being questioned, the parents became hostile and defensive and wanted to record the conversation. When I said no, the parents became visibly angry. Though they did not speak those words, they nonetheless became visibly angry and reluctant to continue the conversation. And as terrible and as warped as that sounds, there's nothing that I said there that actually is technically objectively untrue. It's also, to an extent, it's mixing certain objective elements that maybe are being recorded in an unfair manner, but still factually correct, coupled with the subjective perceptions of the social worker. So now you're this hostile, angry, defensive person who's admitting to hitting their children, who's living in this unsafe environment, and so it just keeps getting deeper and deeper, and so then the social worker wants to talk to your 4-year-old, and wants to talk to them alone. And this is a 4-year-old who, if you ask them what they had for breakfast, they would probably say dragons. They had dragons for breakfast, okay? It's coming from a 4-year-old. It's not really... 4-year-olds say things. So aside from, now you're not only just dealing with the twisting or the filters of the misperceptions, now you're also dealing with a 4-year-old who may not be able to convey information so accurately. So the social worker takes the 4-year-old aside and says, hey, does your mom or dad does he ever hit you or your younger brother? And your 4-year-old says, yes, I all the time I get boo-boos like on my head. Why? Because 4-year-olds say anything. And he hit us out on the table a couple weeks ago, and that's why the mother-in-law got upset in the first place. So the social worker goes back and says, hey, I asked you about the kids getting hurt. You didn't tell me anything about your 4-year-old getting hit. Anything you want to explain to me? And you say, well, yeah, you know that your mother-in-law probably initiated this, and she's always accusing you of hitting the children. So naturally, we're talking about the event with the table, and you say, you innocently reply, yes, I know I didn't say it, but my son hit his head. He hit his head, but it was on the table, and it was a mistake. But other than that, that's the only time he's ever been hit. Well, here's the problem. Number one, the social worker is perceiving the spanking as hitting, so now you've contradicted yourself. First saying yes, I hit the child occasionally, but and now you're saying no, I've never hit the child, and you're talking about the hitting on the table and said, well, that's interesting because I asked what you know about the child being hit. I did not say being hit by a person, nor did I even say hit on the head, and yet you're defending yourself about you hitting him, and you're the one who's bringing up hitting him on the head. So isn't that interesting that the child saying, hey, I got hit on the head, mother-in-law saying, hey, he's hitting the child on the head, and now you're saying, oh, I don't know anything about the child. I never hit him on the head. It was the table that hit him on the head, and I never mentioned him being hit on the head to you. So it's all coming together as this terrible case against you. And frankly, you're looking more and more guilty, and you just keep trying to dig yourself out. And this really happens. This really happens in these cases. It happens to genuinely innocent people. It happens to people who simply have... sometimes they've just made a mistake that's not that bad, but it's turned into something that's just so much worse because of how the information can be, for lack of a better word, twisted or construed or turned around. And then on top of it, the social worker, on top of all this, in this hypothetical example, you have the mother-in-law's testimony, you have the 4-year-old's testimony, you have your words against you, you have the social worker's observations. On top of all this, now the social worker, who does not allow you to record anything, has written in their notes that you said that when you hit the 2-year-old off the couch, it was off of anger because they misunderstood what you said. So now you're also dealing with that, and you have an airtight case against you for child abuse when, in fact, you lightly use and legally use corporal punishment, and that's it. And so it can just it's for this reason that because the government has all the power, because the government has all of this leverage, that we have certain rights. And one of those rights, and a lot of people think about this in the context of criminal matters, but you do have the right to remain silent. The right against self-incrimination, the right to not speak, the right to not answer these questions when the government is asking them. This is not just with police. This is with any governmental official, including CPS. So you have the right to remain silent. And if you elect to not exercise that right, whether you are innocent, guilty, somewhere in between, if you choose to not exercise that right, you are digging your own grave. You are begging for the government to have a case against you. I can tell you that in CPS cases, probably I would say somewhere between 80 and 90% of the instances where allegations are sustained of abuse or neglect are sustained against someone, in 80 to 90% of those cases, those allegations would never have been sustained if the parents involved simply did not talk, if they simply just kept quiet. And it makes such a difference, and it can so vastly affect the outcome and direction of the case. There is simply no discussion to be had about whether this is tactically the right thing to do. Well, again, it's like, well, I have nothing to hide. I don't want blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. It does not matter. If you understand what you're facing, if you understand what you're up against, if you understand how the information can be used, if you understand why it's being collected, there is no consideration that should be given to any alternative other than to simply say nothing. The only thing that's really acceptable to say in this situation is I decline to speak except through an attorney. period. You walk away, you close the door, you hang up the phone. Nothing more is acceptable in this sort of situation. And the CPS workers, something people need to definitely understand with this is that they are trained for this specific situation, and they are trained to get the information out of you. They are trained to lie to you to get the information if needed, and they will absolutely, I absolutely promise you that they will say things like, hey, this is your only chance, this is your chance to clear your name. If you're gonna have to let us in so we can have the conversation, or we're gonna get a warrant and we're gonna have the child removed from your home. It's your choice, now or never. They absolutely will say that, and it is a complete bluff. If these individuals have, if they have evidence, if they have a factual cause and the evidence to remove your child from the home, they will do it with or without your cooperation. If there is some sort of, if they have a case, if they have enough evidence to push this through the courts, to remove your kids from the home, to take any other action, if the evidence is there, then they will move forward with or without your cooperation. Nobody ever talks their way out of CPS involvement. Okay, the only question on their end is, do we have the evidence that we need? When you give your side of the story, you're not giving them evidence. What you are doing is you are sealing off your exit routes. You are creating a situation where there might be an explanation number. Let's say you keep quiet, and they look at the facts of the case and they say, okay, well, maybe he's hitting his kid, maybe he's being too rough, but maybe there's some other explanation out there that would explain this way. Like, let's say you have you have a child who has a handprint shaped bruise on their back, and they suspect that you're the one who put it there, that you're abusing them, that you're hitting your kids, and you put that handprint on their back. And if you refuse to talk to them, they have a handprint on the child's back, but they have no way to prove that you put it there. It could have been a neighbor, it could have been a friend, it could have been an assault in a dark alley. They have no way to place you on that handprint. But then they talk to you and you offer your explanation. Oh, yes, I hit my child in his back. That's my handprint. But what happened was we were playing a game of tag and I just kind of tripped and I fell and I slapped him on the back. It was a complete accident, total mistake. That's all. Well, now you've shut off that exit route. They decide, you know what, we don't believe that story. You eliminated all other possible explanations, and the story you gave them, they don't believe. Or maybe, the mother-in-law saying, no, he's going to say this, but I know he put it there. And so so you seal it off. So under no circumstances does talking with them improve your situation. Does it improve the chances that they will not be involved? Does it in any way discourage them from taking action against you if they believe that they have the evidence against you? It's like in the movies where they say, where arresting police officer reads the arrestee their Miranda rights, and they say, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. This is no different. Anything you say can and will be used against you. And that's all you need to know. So do not talk to CPS. Do not cooperate with them. Do not answer their questions. Do not let them into your home. Do not let them talk to your children. And under no circumstance whatsoever do you believe under no circumstance whatsoever ever believe anything that they're telling you when they threaten you to try to get the information out of you. They are trained to lie to you. They are skilled at lying to you. It's the one thing that they're good at, and my recommendation to anyone who is in this situation is if CPS comes to your door and they say, hey, we have this complaint, we'd like to investigate it, can we talk to you or your kids for just like 5 minutes? Just say no. The only thing it's really okay to say is I refuse to speak except through an attorney. Close the door, walk away. Then do go ahead and contact an attorney to manage any other communications that you may receive from them. Simply because on the one hand, it's a very intimidating situation. It's nice to have a skilled practitioner who is available to kind of guide you through the process, to be your point of contact. And also, if you're, in terms of what you're standing to lose, if they do decide, again, usually it's with your help, if they do decide that an abuse has taken place, it can cost tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. You can lose your children forever. They can be taken away from you literally forever. You never see them again. They're adopted, they're moved into foster care, and then they're adopted out. And a few, a couple $100, $200, $300 maybe, just to have an attorney to talk to, just to have that peace of mind and security in dealing with these folks. It may well be the best investment that you've made in your life. So I hope that if you found this to be useful, that you will forward this to your friends, family, loved ones, anyone that you care about, so that they can have this information. Hopefully you will never find yourself in this situation, but if you do, this little bit of time spent just thinking about it, learning about it, can absolutely protect them from just an incredible, unfathomable world of heartbreak. Again, my name is Brian Mayer. My contact information is on this webpage. Please feel free to subscribe to my videos. I hope you found this helpful. I do practice in this area as well as family law. So if perchance you are in Southern California and looking for representation, please feel free to contact my office. I hope that if I hear from you, it's on the $200 to $300 ends of things that I just talked about, and not the tens of thousands of dollars that I talked about as well. If you watch this and take my advice, then chances are much higher that you can get through this easily, cheaply, and just never have to worry about the worst possible outcome. So thank you so much. Take care.